Surviving storms.
Surviving storm.
Surviving storms.
Fresh food and water and community and also a sense of freedom. I mean, these are all things that are just integral to being alive and as a human being, and we take for granted in Dominica because we have them in abundance. But yeah, they're really not that abundant in a lot of the world. I think in many ways Dominica is an extremely free place. And some might even say free to a fault. But I think that ties into us never being able to be fully colonized the way other islands were, in part because of the topography, and then also in part because of the Negmawan society was extremely strong here. And I think that after something like Maria, you see that freeness, that wildness, that untamableness. It comes out in many ways. So the idea behind the Moving Back, Looking Forward series, after Maria, you know, there's a point where all of us are sort of trying to pick our lives back up and create some sense of normalcy. But at the same time, you look around at the country, at the buildings, at just everything, and it's very not normal. And yet at the same time, there's a sort of like, I guess, grace in the way people are moving and putting things back together. And so I guess I wanted to kind of show those two things side by side, what our sort of mundane lives look like, but in the context of this like post-disaster space. Hope and faith were both really strong themes that came out for me after Maria. You have a lot of people that have lost almost everything, but are still saying things like, thank God for life, or even thank God for water, or thank God for whatever it is that is left. And also this sort of like deep-seated knowing that things can and will get better. And I thought it was very interesting to me because I had just come off of my Uncivilized project where I read the Bible for the first time while I was living out in the forest, which is where I ended up weathering Maria. But it was interesting for me sort of having a whole new perspective on Christianity, and Dominica is a predominantly Christian country. So I don't know, I think I was able to interact with that more, and especially for me, like the photos where we were in the Anglican church, that was a recreation with a congregation and a priest, and I actually thought, you know, there's something quite magical actually about that building having no roof, because already it's this sort of like sacred space where people come together to worship God, but now having no roof at all, it's almost like being exposed to the heavens. Obviously it's not very feasible for, you know, a regular service in case of rain or whatever, but yeah, there was some sense of divine in being exposed to the elements like that. And again, yeah, I think that ties into that hope and faith, and I think that again that comes through in that set of photos. Post Maria was almost like a huge awakening. Before that I was thinking, all right, I'll come back to Dominica, do this project, and then I'll go to England or something like that. And this just like weird awakening happened after Maria, where I felt fully like grounded in Dominica and not wanting to go anywhere else. And it was a strange time post Maria where we had so much less, but at the same time there was an abundance of gratitude for being alive, for fresh water, for community, for farm produce and all that kind of stuff. And also, I would say, a strong sense of hope and looking forward. And I think for me, in many ways, like these pieces, this series kind of encapsulates that time and mindset for me, which I would say is kind of like very formative in terms of like who I am now. There are countries that are more gifted with the natural resources and others less, but also there's many countries where they had these resources, but then through development, they essentially got ruined or disappeared. And so Dominica is this interesting case where a lot of times people will describe Dominica as being so far behind, but if you start thinking about these things as more of circular existence and circular time than linear, then us being behind actually makes us ahead of the curve. And I think we're most definitely ahead of the curve when we can still say that we can bathe in most of our rivers and we can still collect water from springs and not have to worry about them being polluted. It's funny, I think as I've got older, I feel like I'm deconstructing this idea that like time is linear and that it's much more circular, just as the climate and the weather and life and death. And it's interesting that for us, it's something that we need to deconstruct, whereas I think in a lot of other worldviews and indigenous worldviews, these things are like taken as granted and as obvious, and it's almost absurd to hear someone say, oh wow, I'm learning that this is the case now, when, yeah, I think in many ways, at least for many people, I guess it's quite obvious. But patterns repeat, time repeats, these disasters repeat, and as climate change intensifies, they're gonna repeat faster and faster until I guess we end up in a new age. If I had the choice to tell myself something back then, I don't think I would tell myself anything. I think that this last couple of years, it all kind of works out in a kind of a way. I think sometimes you just gotta go through things and not know what's coming.